Lots of old friends, and everybody actually looks like an old friend, and a few new faces. And it's nice to see our friend Norman, the OLLI photographer. Let me start by thanking the OLLI program and Lamargo. Okay, what I'm thinking is that our afternoon will proceed like this. I will read for a bit, and then our revered poet Geralid Lockin will read, and then I have invited a second guest reader, and that is Shannon Phillips. I was privileged to be on Shannon Phillips' MFA committee at Long Beach State when she wrote her thesis of poems, and I have invited her for two reasons: not only to read a bit of her own work, but also she is an editor, Picture Show Press, and I thought she might be able to give us some insight into what editors look for when you submit poems, what it is that editors are looking for, and perhaps you might want to ask a few questions on how to submit poems to poetry presses. And then comes the most exciting part of our afternoon, and that is when the OLLI members read their poems. All right, well, we are here in this wonderful season of spring, and April is officially Poetry Month, and you know the wonderful quote, T.S. Eliot, April is the cruelest month, growing lilacs, breeding lilacs out of the dead land. It's one of my favorite lines in all of poetry. Here comes this beautiful spring with all the beautiful buds and all the beautiful blossoms and all the hope and promise of possibility. So here's a spring poem, a very short one. Spring cleaning. I've got the trash cans ready. The A list, keep for sure. The B list, negotiable. The C list, chuck it. When I'm on a cleaning spree, you're lucky you still have sentimental value. I'm very grateful to my husband of nearly 50 years. We celebrate our golden wedding anniversary on October 4th, and I take nothing for granted. But this is because we're older, role models. I've started to notice them lately, even though my husband's quit smoking. Their instruction may be needed. I am grateful for these mentors, old women who travel in packs. What a price to pay for freedom. I do not like to sleep alone. I crave men's campfire, the proximity of bodies. When it happens to me, there will be no need to meet twice a month. I have lived in grief groups all my life, but I am grateful for the lessons offered to me now. I am learning even last week's widows have newly washed hair, knowing already that fresh love is their only hope. And all of us sentient creatures on this wonderful planet need love. Even our avian friends. This is bird love. I could care less about the bird, which David patiently cares for, selecting the best mullet, rye, sunflower, and the freshest water. I do nothing for the well-being of our feathered pet, but it does its circle dance just for me, imagining in its bird mind my fine, resplendent plume. The biological mechanics, we call them nature, squawk the great unfairness all day long, as if any of us needed another lesson. David gets quite viciously pecked. I get yearning unrequited, side-eyed adoration, great round-necked swoons of bird love. This is a tribute to my husband. Art shots. You used to take art shots of blades of grass with the Instamatic. There were no lighting gauges or f-stops, no focus or calibration. Such faith and trust you had that beauty would offer itself without circumspection, disperse itself willingly, loveliness and composition ungoaded. This is a generosity of aesthetics not usually seen. I'm always interested in trajectories and directions. Where should we go? How should we go in life? This is only hummingbirds fly true north. Every morning I spit on my finger and hold it to the fates. If only they would direct me simply, east, south, north, west. I do not know where to turn. I try the direction of sunrise and lean toward here or there, the door or the dresser, the ocean or inland. I plow through this blue-checked bedroom with swooping arms, the air parts to my left and right, forward and backward. There is a direction between straight and bent. The gyres dance there. I walk that selvage, an arc of wonder and yearning. There is no light or lightness, but color is there. All day I walk this arc I cannot plot, bed to coffee pot, table to desk, sink to your arms. The zigzag makes me dizzy, the verge barely holds. All we have of salvation is frayed. Chez Plato. I store Plato's ideal forms in the basement, and every so often go down to refresh my memory. They're a little crumpled, need ironing. The famous bed is now a sleep number. The philosopher has embraced pop culture. All day long, I imitate the great verities, go down for a peek, fix if I need to, today's objects and actions not quite right. Though well-intended, far off base from all that ought. Back to our theme of springtime. This is a poem that I wrote decades ago, an early poem. And it's always fresh for me when it's spring. I remember this particular tree. Springtime verse. I know that most people are fucking sick of tree poems. I think that I Shall Never See was anthologized to death. And in retaliation, whenever I see a tree, I generally invoke pragmatic sanction. But I must necessarily forbear today when I see out my window the 3 liquid ambers that predispose my days. I want to celebrate just one, although the others are needed for context. That couple of this tree trinity that knows the world's winds and ways, that impels their dormancy just a little longer. Who knows why some are taciturn and others invite tree houses? I ask you, beg you really, to throw away the smugness with which you read Kilmer and see this tree, it's on the left with me. It is young maybe, or naive, or has forgotten the last big gale. It budded days ago, weeks before it had to, thrusting out arboreal nipples, precocious and green, the color of Easter egg dye. It is the bravest thing I know. This is a, I know that we're in the season now of our spring holidays. I'm actually doing a Passover Seder tomorrow for 17 people. And I know that Easter comes on Sunday. This is a poem in honor of Easter, written by an early 17th century metaphysical poet, George Herbert. I remember when I was in graduate school, I wrote a lengthy paper on this poem. Lord, who createst man in wealth and store, though foolishly he lost the same, decaying more and more, till he became most poor. With thee, O let me rise as larks harmoniously, and sing this day thy victories, then shall the fall further the flight in me. My tender age in sorrow did begin, and still with sicknesses and shame, thou didst so punish sin, that I became most thin. Let me combine and feel thy victory, for if I imp my wing on thine, affliction shall advance the flight in me. One of the things that I love so much about this poem is that it's a shaped poem, Easter wings. And the poem, I believe, takes off and flies. A shaped poem by George Herbert. Okay, a couple more. I think we're all lucky to live near the beach. And I live in a condo on the beach, and I feel very unencumbered there. I love to look out and feel all the breadth of living on the edge of the continent. My husband and I drove up to Lake Arrowhead last weekend, and I thought that it was absolutely beautiful, but I feel kind of those inward forces when I see a lake. Something directs me inward, but when I see the ocean, I'm directed centrifugally, outward. So this is Current. And it is a different beach at night, but I still know that all that vastness is there. After dark, inside the breakwater, waves crash uninterrupted by ships or swimmers. Their solemn work takes the length of night, renewing again the beat of me, tomorrow's meter. Inside me, I witness rhythm, take in funnels of ocean, in the unceasing in and out, infinite legato. Sound cramped from bending, moans in agony, owning again the grave anchor. High tide happens quickly, water rising over sand, tide over balcony. I am damp with hearing. I was fortunate enough to, many decades ago, get to do a dissertation on an LA woman named Ruth LaPrade, who was and is completely unknown. She was one of, like so many of us, LA people, humans, who collect things in boxes. And she gave all her boxes to USC, and I was looking for a project, and I opened the first box. It was called The Poet's Garden, and it said not to be read by anyone during the lifetime of Ruth LaPrade, so I was hooked. It was like I was discovering this treasure. And this is one of her poems from her book, Song Tree. And it's about our theme today, the season of spring. Magic. I lift this head, bowed low so long, I lift my heart and sing, for I am all in flower with the magic of the spring. The trees have put their garlands on, the birds are mad with song, and love and joy thrill through the earth that has been dead so long. Oh, let me put my garlands on and lift my heart and sing, for I am all in flower with the magic of the spring. And before I introduce our next reader, I want to talk just a little bit about a lovely experience that I just recently had going to the Huntington Gardens. If you have not been lately to the Huntington Gardens in Pasadena, in San Marino, please treat yourself. The season is gorgeous. It is stunning. The flowers are stunning, and the grounds are beautiful. And the little turtles are out in the lily ponds, craning their little necks towards the sun. So it really is a wonderful. Professor Emeritus of English from Cal State University, Long Beach, where he helped found the MFA, the Masters of Fine Arts program in creative writing. Professor Lockin is the 7th most published poet in the United States. I just cannot sing enough praises and accolades for this wonderful literary person. I was fortunate enough to be asked by Gale, Dictionary of Literary Biography, to do a piece on him for World War II American writers, or American writers since World War II. He is not only a poet, but a novelist and a short story writer and a critic and a reviewer and an editor. And we are all in for a treat. And I have been told that he may not do his tap dance today, but we are very grateful for whatever kind of dance and song and poetry reading we get from Professor Geralid Lockin.
I'm having trouble finding the poem. I know it's in there, or else I wouldn't have given the book title, The Iceberg Theory. That was the theory, that Hemingway and others have had, which is that in favor of subtlety in writing, and in favor of reading things that are subtle. In other words, an iceberg is, I think, 80% underwater and 20% above water, something like that. And so they suggest that the best literature is often also that way. That what you read above the water is just a hint of what is under the water. And if you keep reading and think about it and let it grow on you and the rest, and you kind of absorb it, you may find that like an iceberg, it really captures your soul. So that's why that's what the poem is about. Let me see briefly if I should be up front. I actually found it here. I thought it was going to be that thing that writers hate to have happen most of all, which is get up here, to give a reading of their greatest works, and they can't find any of their works at all, and so they start asking them from their students in the audience, and their students rush up with their works, and those are even worse than their own, so we'll go on. This is the iceberg theory. All the food critics hate iceberg lettuce. You'd think romaine was descended from Orpheus's laurel wreath. You'd think raw spinach had all the nutritional benefits attributed to it by Popeye, not to mention aesthetic subtleties worthy of Verlaine and Debussy. They'll even salivate over chopped red cabbage, just to disparage poor old Mr. Iceberg lettuce. I guess the problem is it's just too common for them. It doesn't matter that it tastes good, has a satisfying crunchy texture, holds its freshness, and has crevices for the dressing. Whereas the darker, leafier varieties are often bitter, gritty, and flat. It just isn't different enough, and it's too damn American. Of course a critic has to criticize. A critic has to have something to say. Perhaps that's why theory critics purport to find interesting so much contemporary poetry. that just bores the SHIT out of me. I don't want to be a bad influence on a youngster. Someone was a bad influence on me when I was a youngster. I was 45 at the time. And I was okay until then. I really enjoy a salad with plenty of chunky iceberg lettuce. The more the merrier. Drenched in an Italian or Roquefort dressing. And the poems I enjoy are those I don't have to pretend that I'm enjoying. Do any of you, I would bet that a few of you maybe have in your life pretended to enjoy certain poems that you could hardly stand. So maybe the author of those poems was sitting right next to you someplace, you know. So you try it. You know, maybe tears were dripping from your eyes. They are from mine, but usually when I'm hungover, you know, not from anything else. We have all of us always been serving life sentences without benefit of parole. I enjoy the vengeance motif in literature and film as much as anyone. And yet in real life, I don't think I've ever really taken vengeance on anyone. I've been vaguely aware of this, and I've sort of half wondered if something weren't probably lacking in me. Then recently, I was in the presence of a man who 20 years ago took part in an exercise of authority that could have had disastrous consequences for me. The matter ended up benefiting me, but that was nobody's intention. I didn't recognize him at first. After all, I had been 24 then, and he was probably at least 40. I'm middle-aged now. Actually, I'm 110. And he is old. For a while, I plotted strategies of verbal confrontation and humiliation. But seeing how life had reduced him, as it has reduced me also, I just didn't have the anger. I made sure he knew that I recognized him, and we joked around some, not alluding to the incident. And when he got up to go, he laid a hand on my shoulder. There are still a couple of scores outstanding that I sometimes think I'd like to settle. And if I can conceive of situations that might send me into a Clint Eastwood of an orbit, while I'm beginning to realize that vengeance is mine, what he or whoever was standing in for him that day was trying to get across was that life, or call it nemesis, will see to it that each of us is rehabilitated of his pride. Did you ever discover that you weren't as great as you thought you were? I haven't. So you're free to, take over for me, please. Yeah, I can barely sleep at night. Not during the day, though. I sleep all the time during the day. Rejection slips and slip-ups. This is just the briefest of pep talks to any of you young writers who have been receiving so many rejection slips that you are on the verge of accepting the executioner's thumbs down. In 1863, a group of artists rejected by the official Parisian Salon, I read on the Universe calendar, exhibited at a salon of their own dubbed the Salon des Refusés, or the Salon of the Rejected. These included Cézanne, Monet, Jonquind, Guillaume, Whistler, Fontaine, Latour, and Pissarro. So those were some of the ones who considered themselves the worst writer of their time, you know. Of course, they all ended up the best-known great writers. That's a terrible thing about Notre Dame, you know, burning down. Even my hardened soul, you know, was affected by that a great deal as soon as I heard about it. I've been there many times, and I know Trish has. I know many of you have been there to Paris, to the Church of Notre Dame. And I'm sure they'll rebuild and the rest, but you know, it can't be the same. That's one of the great sorrows, you know, when the real one is gone, and you can replace it and call it the same thing, and maybe it's even built better or more beautiful or something than the first one, but still, if you have memories of Paris at all, you know, they no doubt have their place for Notre Dame, and it won't come again in the same form, nor will anything in any of our lives. This is a book I wrote after coming back from a trip to Cuba that I took a few years ago by myself. It's Hemingway Colloquium, The Poet Goes to Cuba. I took a bunch of snapshots, and a very good photographer got a hold of them, and he did a great job of doing the cover from these, you know, crummy little, really amateuristic photos that I just snapped from well, I'm from Rochester, New York, and so of course, you know, it was a snapshot from, what was the great company? Eastman Kodak, yeah. Eastman Kodak. They pretty much owned the entire city when I was growing up. And they sponsored all the kids' baseball leagues and basketball leagues and everything. It ran the place. You know, we, more than the governor of New York State, I think, they did. So I imagine they're probably gone now. I haven't gotten back to Rochester very often, but fortunately when I was growing up, it had a lot of very good teachers and writers there, and artists, visual artists as well. Now, nobody knows Rochester for anything, but you know, a place where the Genesee River flows into Lake Ontario and makes it even more polluted than it already is. But you know, then they all go and they whoosh it over to Canada. You know? No, we have to root for the United States, right? You can't root against the United States. You have to root for the United States, and it will get all of those impurities that come down those waterways over in Canada, where they can't harm us good people. Okay? How many of you, us good people, have been to Canada? Or how many are Canadian? Oh, I'm very Canadian myself, you know. You can't grow up in Rochester, New York and not be a little bit Canadian, although you're only 50 miles from Buffalo. Yeah, this is a book I wrote after coming back from a trip to Cuba. And I had been there before, and then this time, which was just a few years ago, and I wrote it in like one day, you know, the whole book. I had a few notes on it, not very many though. I took notes while I was there, but I was only there a couple of weeks. But when I got back, I turned them into proper length of notes. Going alone. Roy Hargrove comes to town 4 nights at the Jazz Bakery, 2 shows a night. And I've been listening to Havana because I've been there, and to tenors of our time because I want to take into my life the music of the young jazz legends, with Miles and Diz and Coltrane dead. So I make myself drive up the 405 to Culver City on a Sunday night and end up staying for 2 sets, the second at a discount for those of us who have anteed up our $18 for the first. And Frank Lacey's indefatigable on slide trombone. The old pro John Hicks is in control on piano, while Sherman Irby, Willie Jones, and Gerald Cannon gradually emerge from modesty to driven lyricism on the alto, drums, and bass. And I think of Enrique Cerulles, the Cuban novelist, leonine and leathery, and of his testimonio, El Imperio de la Habana, his rising to the microphone at the International Hemingway Colloquium for an impassioned apologia of Hemingway in the grand manner. This man was not a drunk. This man was not a coward. This man was a genius. This genius was a man. The sharks may eat his flesh, but this giant is immortal. With all of which I wholeheartedly agree. And now his warm and stately letter, postmarked September, arrives in February. Will I be able to find for him the Spanish edition of The Garden of Eden and of Carlos Baker's Hemingway, which he has wanted to read? I'll try, but either book might send his blood pressure through the roof. And what is his life like there? The hardships and the deprivations, isolation from an international readership, a city where the past and present are one, future chronically indefinite. I will write to him that I listened to Rubén González, Compay Segundo, Ibrahim Ferrer, Eliades Ochoa, and their soars, guajiros, ballads and danzones awaken in me the warmth of a place and people that, in so few days, I came to love and feel at ease with. And I think of a young woman, let's call her Carmen, who spoke and danced with the fire and full-bodiedness of a woman who precedes, survives, transcends all the anti-music that is politics. I wonder if her fire will consume her there or here. I see her hair fly in the wind. I see her breast pressed tight against the blouse. I see the centuries that move within her limbs. I know her dance is that of the sea and cypresses, the torrents of the atmosphere, the mysteries of the Santeria, the sacred that is always also the profane. I do not think that bureaucrats, theirs or ours, will succeed in extinguishing her candle, votive flicker of what must endure. This is one of my books, a complete book of poems, the Life Force poems. I was dwelling on the life force in us, in all of us, I presume, or we either hope it was or it is. And these are poems that, they weren't all about the life force, but that's what was on my mind and that I was writing about in those days. So, this is called Bloomsbury. I know you're a very literary audience, and I'm sure that you have devoted many hours to reading works by the Bloomsbury group, and that's time well taken indeed. I'm a great fan of the Bloomsbury movement also. And it came along at a time when there were a lot of male artists, male editors and writers, and I loved their work. I loved it, and I'm a male, so I could identify with it and all. But I did think that it was sorry that there were not a few greater women writers, and certainly that became quickly corrected. by the movements, not only of actual authors and authors who were writing at that time, maybe many of you, but of writers, literary writers, women throughout the ages who were rediscovered. Bloomsbury. How many have been to Bloomsbury? Over in England, the Bloomsbury group. Well, you got to get there if you go. If you bother to go to England, you got to get to the Bloomsbury part of London and all. It's a center of culture and of literature. You didn't have to be that talented to be an artist, or that beautiful to have a sex life, or that sexual to have the romance, drama, lyricism of entanglements. You could have a family or simply be a part of one. If you were a stay-at-home, you could make your home your work of art. You could cultivate both privacy and hospitality. Bisexuality made perfect sense. So did pacifism. So did the Omega workshops, picking up where William Morris left off. Nature could be your own backyard. Books were as real as journalism. Book reviews mattered. Children were contextualized. The painters weren't as great as the post-impressionists that popularized and interpolated, but they were fortunate enough to have writers in the group who were world class. And they were smart enough to do their portraits. They were smart enough to do their portraits. These bifocals are betraying me here. Even if sometimes they forgot to paint the faces in, as some schools of painting around that time where they'd leave whole, heads off the people. Vanessa Bell did not forget to pillory the visage of Lady Ottoline Mornell, not to mention that of her husband's mistresses. Free love was supposed to reign. Deceit and jealousy be banned. But are they ever? We try to blame our fallen nature on society, and we figment our emotional enterprises. But we cannot eradicate our epigenetic predisposition, programmed to compete, survive. We can only dissemble our emotions, sometimes sublimate them, forthright, passive aggressiveness for outright hostility. Thus do our Camelots become dystopian. Only Dora Carrington, outsider, had the power and the passion. The others had their pride of place, of education, breeding, influence, eloquence, etiquette, but the fire was lacking in them. Maybe Eliot, a Hogarth author, sensed in them, as in himself, their hollowness, the lack, how beautiful the opening of The Wasteland, though. The modern music of that page had opened in the glass case just across the gallery from the prose sinuosities of the first page of the preface to the eminent Victorians of Lytton Strachey, and how he looked exactly as he should and would, as portrayed by Jonathan Pryce in the film. These art directors do their field work, and how the men all cross their legs like women. Somehow they manage to procreate, though, and still do. Yeah, how do you do that? Let me try. Yeah, I'm not procreating, so I might as well quit. And Angelina Hell is alive still. Angelina Bell is alive still. These glasses are betraying me. in her 90s, and I'm only 2 degrees of separation from her, via Julian Bell and Brian Hinton, who are friends from England of mine. And if I've been to St. Ives, where as children they played, maybe posed upon the sand of Studland Beach, and I've stayed on Gower Street, near all the squares of Gordon, Bedford, Russell, Tavistock, Monk's House, Charleston Farm, Knoll, Sissinghurst, read Freud in the laconic, unlaconic sentences of Strachey, of James. He and his wife, Alex, and Adrian Stephen all became lay analysts. I would continue to be drawn to them, dragged to them sometimes by my wife, who knows their lives and everything on literary they produced much better than I do, who would perhaps have been a good deal happier with them, or maybe only think so. And at the end I will have learned, as the old possum did, what any child knows, screaming into the surroundings. He will try to make a world of habitat for what he'll hang his name on. It's not easy to be human, and the humaner you try to be, the harder it will get. This is a book I'm not going to read from because it's a book of all the short fiction that I've written, and the individual things are pretty long, so I don't want to take up the whole afternoon and evening, and the rest of the week or anything with one of them. Oh, you want to hear it? No, I won't do it to you. I think of Trish sometimes when I'm reading this, because she has some of the characteristics and the red hair and everything that as the woman in this poem does. It's based on you're all writers, I think, just about. Write about other writings, other people's writings too, and painters. Write about paintings and all, what they mean to you, and music. Write about the music that you love. Don't think that it all has to be limited to language. Language is there. It's always going to be there. It's very important to use language as powerfully as possible, but don't be afraid to use it in different subjects. Richard Diebenkorn, Girl Smoking. Elegant legs, gracefully crossed, not Hopper's palette, but a diva on a divan, knowing she's attractive, but without illusions of divinity, thus not a prima donna. Vulnerable shoulders, a nipple out of nowhere. She hugs herself, supports an elbow on a forearm. Anxiety as well as inhalation. Sophistication, but not Ellington exactly either. The room and atmosphere of color. And cologne? Home from the dance, home from the date, home from the cabaret. A lady in waiting, wondering if he will show. We used to be able to feel good about the way we smoked, the way we looked when smoking. It was theater. A lot of women that I dated used to smoke. After sex, a cigarette, a drink, pleasure after pleasure, sitting up in bed or at a kitchen table, killing time until the next time. Friendly conversations with each other, with ourselves. They write me sometimes. Now married they are with grown children, spacious homes and gardens, justly proud and doting husbands. Good times, they say. We had good times. They were good times. They say, I don't know if you will remember me. Yes, yes, I do, now more than ever, after 30 or more years. A sketch, a smoky reverie of red coiffure, a femininity gone out of fashion. Yes, yes, they were the best of times, though perilous, now proved imperishable. My God, I'm glad that I have women to remember, and that to some at least, I meant good times. What did you think of A Star Is Born?
It was very good.
Yeah. What was one of the songs in there? Get me started on some sort of, pardon me?
La Vie and Rose.
Oh, love you.
I'm going to have to hum some of them. La da 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 da, la da 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 da, da 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 da, the rose. La da 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 da, la da 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 da, la da 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 da. La da 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 da, la da 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 da, la da 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 da, la da da da, la da da da, la da da da, I have to get in one dance now. That's with one half broken foot, you know? Well, two broken feet now. Da 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 da. Thank you.
All right, the inimitable Professor Geralid Lockin. Thank you so much.